Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Ladies and gentlemen, I have two, maybe three videos that I'll be putting out today because there's just a lot of stuff to go over. But I wanted to take you through a brief history lesson today. And I'll tell you what, those people that say that history doesn't repeat itself, but it quite often rhymes, I think we're going through one of those rhyming periods right now, in more ways than one. And what I'm going to go over through today with you all is just one of those periods that we're going through. And hopefully I'll have another video or so out today showing you how history does rhyme. And therefore, it may not repeat itself fully, but it'll be pretty darn close. So bear with me, because I believe that the second article that I'm going to go over with you all is probably more important than this one, historically speaking, that is. Well, here it says that China warns the West that outrageous sanctions can force Russia into a corner. Meaning what? You know, whenever you have like a wild animal or something and you're going towards it, usually it runs away, right? Usually it'll run away if it's got a way to go. But if you force it into a corner where it has nowhere to go, that animal becomes vicious. History has proven time and time again that sanctions cannot solve problems. Sanctions will only harm ordinary people, impact the economy and financial system, and worsen the global economy. And that US and EU sanctions on Russia will only escalate the situation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this doesn't really have too much to do about Russia per se, right? What we're going over right now. What it has to do is what is a country willing to do when they have nothing left to lose? And we have a perfect example in history that shows us exactly that. Why did Japan attack Pearl Harbor? And this, ladies and gentlemen, is something that I don't think is really taught in schools very well, if at all. Children may learn that, yes, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. I believe it was December 7th, 1941, and that's what entered us into World War II. They may learn that, you know. But why did Japan attack Pearl Harbor? You see, when we know the reasons behind the facts, then that's how we learn, ladies and gentlemen. But when we just know what happened, all we're doing is regurgitating what has happened in history and not learning from what happened in history, so that maybe we can avoid making those same mistakes again. Now, I want you to listen to some of the similarities between the United States and Japan back in the 40s and Russia and the United States today. By the time the first Japanese bomber appeared over Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, tensions between Japan and the United States had been mounting for the better part of a decade, making war seem inevitable. The only difference between then and now, ladies and gentlemen, because Japan was a heck of a contender, right? They were some mean soldiers, right? They would fight to the death. They didn't care. You know, what is it, kamikaze? The pilots that used to just know that they were going to crash to their death and use their planes as kind of like human bombs in a way, right? So they were a pretty mean opponent or contestant. But ladies and gentlemen, Japan didn't have nuclear bombs back then, right? So I would wonder, would Japan have used a nuclear bomb if they had it back then? And I would almost think yes, because like I said, they had nothing left to lose. So let's go over this really quick, because very interesting, and it's very reminiscent of what's going on today. When Japanese bombers appeared over Pearl Harbor, the U.S. was very unprepared for the surprise attack. Or so they say, that it was a surprise attack. I have something very small to show you after this that maybe indicate that it wasn't. Because ladies and gentlemen, when governments can't do anything else, what do? They take us to war. Right? And that's just history playing out. Tensions began during the Great Depression. Before Pearl Harbor, tensions between Japan and the United States had been mounting for the better part of a decade. The island nation of Japan, isolated from the rest of the world, for much of its history, embarked on a period of aggressive expansion near the turn of the 20th century. Aggressive expansion, right, ladies and gentlemen? That's one commonality as to what's going on today, right? During the Great Depression of the 30s, Japan sought to solve its economic and demographic woes by forcing its way into China. Right? And in 1931, they invaded Manchuria. Then the League of Nations condemned the invasion. You see the similarities? Okay. Then Japan withdrew from the international organization. And I do believe that there has been a lot of world organizations, I'm going to say, like one of them is the G20, one of them is the G7 or something like that, that Russia has either withdrawn from or been kicked out of. The US was trying to stop Japan's global expansion. In light of such atrocities, the United States began passing economic sanctions against Japan. Now remember, ladies and gentlemen, causation and correlation don't exactly have to match. They don't equal. Meaning that the things that Japan was doing back then that caused the US and other countries to sanction them or embargo them, which is pretty much the same thing, don't have to be the exact same reasons why things like this are happening today, like sanctions with Russia. It's just, it's just two periods of history that are repeating themselves, but they are very close, and the outcomes are playing out to be pretty similar to what they were back then. So they go on to say that some of the economic sanctions against Japan was trade embargoes on aircraft exports, oil and scrap metal, among other key goods, and gave economic support to the other forces, right, that they were fighting against. And they go on to say that Tokyo and Washington negotiated for months leading up to the Pearl Harbor attack without success. While the United States hoped embargoes on oil and other key goods would lead Japan to halt expansionism, the sanctions and other penalties actually convinced Japan to stand its ground. What's happening right now with all of these sanctions that's going on in Russia? Right? Is Russia backing down? No, they're going forward. They've kind of like doubled down instead. Right? They've got other systems in place to go around the sanctions that are being placed on them, and they are living life without a lot of harm being done to them at the ground level, right? At the level of the people. Remember when I say that sanctions are really against the people. So the more miserable that the people are, the more that the government worries, because it doesn't want the people to overtake them. Because the government knows, ladies and gentlemen, that the power is really in the people. It's not in government, it's in the people. So governments want to make sure that your public, doesn't really know what's going on, but that they're happy enough so that they won't revolt. Pretty much that's what it comes down to. Being that Japan was standing its ground, right? What happened? The people started getting angry, but not against the government. Right? This is where propaganda comes in. So Japan stood its ground and stirred up the anger of its people against Western interference into their affairs. To Japan, war with the United States had become inevitable, or seemed to be inevitable, in order to defend its status as a major world power. Because the odds were stacked against them, their only chance was the element of surprise. We won't go into what happened when they hit Pearl Harbor. We all know what happened. But the key point here, ladies and gentlemen, is what? Is that Japan was pushed into a corner. And they pretty much told themselves, we're either going to starve if we allow this to continue and die, or we're either going to fight. And at least we have a chance if we fight. Because what was going on is that they had so much sanctions and embargoes, meaning that other countries couldn't do business with them. Nothing was getting into them. And Japan is an island that imports pretty much most of the things it uses, now and back then as well. Right? That they had no choice, or at least they thought they had no choice. So what did they do? They attacked. So I went ahead and found something where someone actually found it, and it's actually quoted from official documents in the United States. So this right here is a title that says, "Do Freedom of Information Act files prove that FDR had foreknowledge of Pearl Harbor?" Now, after reading this, ladies and gentlemen, reading other documents that I've read in the past, I absolutely do. And let me go ahead and start off right here. And this here is, according to the America's Freedom of Information Act, the answers to the mysteries of Pearl Harbor can be found in the extraordinary number of documents that the gentleman who researched this was able to attain through the Freedom of Information Act request. Cable after cable of decryptions, scores of military messages that America was intercepting clearly showed, now they're talking back in the 40s, all right, or in the early 40s or 1940, clearly showed that Japanese ships were preparing for war and heading straight for Hawaii. Stinnett, who's the author that created this, that sought out the Freedom of Information Act, who was a journalist and World War II veteran, spent 16 years delving into the National Archives. He pored over more than 200,000 documents and conducted dozens of interviews. This meticulous research led Stinnett to a firm-held conclusion that FDR did know that the Japanese were about to attack Pearl Harbor. But ladies and gentlemen, they needed a war. All right? Believe it or not, they needed a war. The reason I say they is because during that time that World War II had already started, the United States of America was not entered into it. And the people of the United States wanted nothing to do with entering into the war. And here is the quote that was extracted from some of those documents. "Your boys are not going to be sent into any foreign wars," were Roosevelt's famous campaign statements of 1940. So when he was campaigning for the presidency, I believe it was his second or third term, right? He said, "Listen, America, we're not going to be sending your boys to war." FDR's military and State Department leaders were agreeing that a victorious Germany would threaten the national security of the United States. In the White House meeting, the strong feeling was that America needed a call to action. This is not what the public wanted, though. 80 to 90% of the American people wanted nothing to do with Europe's war. So according to Stinnett, Roosevelt provoked Japan to attack us. Let it happen at Pearl Harbor, and thus galvanize the country to war. Because we all need something to bring us together, to want us to say, yes, let's go to war. Remember what happened 22 years ago? Many who came into contact with Roosevelt during that time hinted that FDR wasn't being forthright about his intentions in Europe. After the attack on the Sunday evening of December 7th of 1941, Roosevelt had a brief meeting in the White House with Edward R. Murrow, the famed journalist, and William Donovan, the founder of the Office of Strategic Services. Later, Donovan told an assistant that he believed FDR welcomed the attack and didn't seem surprised. The only thing Roosevelt seemed to care about was if the public would now support a declaration of war. And this is in a book called The Day of Deceit. I haven't read it, but it is by the author who got the documents by using the Freedom of Information Act to go ahead and get those over 200,000 documents to go over. And this is not the first time that I've heard about this, ladies and gentlemen. I do believe that Roosevelt was being advised by one of his admirals that, hey, why in the world are we keeping our ships at Pearl Harbor? We should be out at sea because they are vulnerable there. And Roosevelt told him, you're going to keep those ships there, and that's that. October 1940, FDR adopted a specific strategy to incite Japan to commit an overt act of war. Part of the strategy was to move America's Pacific Fleet out of California and anchor it in Pearl Harbor. Admiral James Richardson, the commander of the Pacific Fleet, strongly opposed keeping the ships in harm's way in Hawaii. He expressed this to Roosevelt, so the president went ahead and relieved him of his command. Right? And later, Richardson quoted Roosevelt as saying, sooner or later, this is a quote, sooner or later, the Japanese will commit an overt act against the United States, and the nation will be willing to enter the war. To those who believe that government conspiracies can't possibly happen, Day of Deceit could prove them otherwise. Stinnett's well-documented book makes a convincing case that the highest officials of the United States, including the highest official, fooled and deceived millions of Americans about one of the most important days in the history of the country. It now has to be considered one of the most definitive, if not definitive, book on the subject. When governments have nothing left to lose, they take you to war. And when you have nothing left to lose, you lose it. Meaning, like, if Russia has nothing left to lose, what else are they going to do, ladies and gentlemen? These sanctions that are going on, I don't agree on sanctions because, like I said in the beginning, it's not against governments, it's against the people. Placing sanctions on a country is a way for you to hurt the people so that the people can put pressure on the government. And it brings nothing but sorrow. Politicians can only do one thing, ladies and gentlemen. One thing. Is talk. That's all politicians can do. They can use their words, right, to make policies. They can use their words and their pens. I guess talking right. They can use their words and their pens to make policy. And when those policies fail, it is we the people that pay the price. All right, ladies and gentlemen? Why do you think they take so many polls to see what people think of Congress or the president or vice president or whatever? Why do you think they take so many polls? Because they want to know if what they're writing is right. But the scary part is what happens when you get a government that doesn't care what you think and will take you to war anyways just because it feels that it needs to do so in order to preserve its own interests and not yours. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you got something out of this. I just thought this pretty interesting. We are reliving history, and as I've stated several times, that we live in a cycle. Nature is a cycle, and things do happen over and over and over again, especially on the macro level, meaning the 80 to 100 year cycle, because we just forget about the past as the generations go by, and we refuse to learn history. And learn our mistakes so that we won't repeat them again. And it looks like here that we're repeating a very, very costly mistake once again. Hopefully it won't happen, but it seems that things are somewhat escalating over there. So history seems to be rhyming, at least for now. Having said that, have a great day. Remember to be good to each other. When good people do good things happen. Remember to reach one, teach one, and repeat. If we all did this, the world would be a better place. And you know that it will be a better place. Many blessings to all of your families. I'm Alaska Prepper. I am out. Ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you all day how great I think Nutrient Survival is. However, I found this tool that Nutrient Survival inserted into their webpage that allows you to see for yourself exactly what it is that you are paying for when compared to other popular long-term food storage or survival foods. Now, I'm not picking on Mountain House here, but I wanted to show you real quick. The Nutrient Survival Triple Mac Cheese compared to the Mountain House Creamy Macaroni and Cheese. This is what you're getting, ladies and gentlemen. This is why I think Nutrient Survival, not think, but know, is the most nutrient-dense survival food or even food that there is in the market. If you go to this tool and you just go ahead and put your cursor or your mouse over any of these nutritional items here, it tells you and it compares what it is that it has along with what Mountain House has. So, for example, if I go to protein, it shows that a serving of Triple Mac cheese has 24% of your daily value of protein, whereas in Mountain House, it's 15%. Fiber, as you can see, 21% to 0. Omega-3s, 22% to 0. Omega-6, only 7%, but also compared to 0. And if you go ahead and put this over anything that you have any concerns over, for example, sodium, only 11% of the daily value per serving, whereas with Mountain House, you're using up 30% of your daily value. I often get asked, why is Nutrient Survival pricier than other long-term food storage companies? Well, in my opinion, it's not, because you're not getting the same with other long-term food storage companies, as you see here, than you are with Nutrient Survival. Here's their Homestyle Scramble, which is compared to their breakfast skillet. And you can see right here, all you have to do is point And I can do this all day, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the lasagna with meat sauce. And even though, let me point this out, even though the Mountain House lasagna with meat sauce has actual freeze-dried meat in it, whereas Nutrient Survival is no meat at all, it's vegetarian, look at this, 22% of your daily value of protein, whereas in Mountain House you only get 13%. The Maple Almond Crunch, which is awesome. I like to have it with milk and a little bit of honey, compared to the Oxen Farms Oats and Honey Granola. Same story, ladies and gentlemen. You are getting what you pay for, which is the nutrients that your body needs every day in order to survive and thrive, not just survive. Calories is king. This is what you're getting when you get Oxen Farms Oats and Honey Granola. Now, like I said, I'm not picking on any particular company. I just want people to know that this is the very best nutrient-dense survival food in the market. So feed your freedom with Nutrient Survival.